I'm going to speak to the political risk analyst, Dr. Andreas Krieg, who's also an associate professor at the School of Security Studies at King's College London. Thanks very much indeed for being with us. So what do you make of this apparent contradiction between the pressure that the US says it wants to put on Israel over the humanitarian cost of the operations in Gaza, and then this apparently these deliveries that have been green-lighted, according to the report?
Well, good afternoon. I think it begs the question to what extent US foreign policy is mostly performative nowadays. There seems to be a massive gap between the rhetoric that's being used by the Biden administration in terms of being harsher on Israel, condemning the Netanyahu government, and also, clamping down on the Netanyahu, the performance of that government in the Gaza Strip. But on the other hand, we see a constant stream of weapons going into Israel for the last 6 months, and also a very clear effort by the Biden administration to bypass congressional oversight where they can by keeping below a particular threshold in terms of the cost of weapons being dumped in Israel. And then the biggest question, the biggest concern that we have now is obviously that these particular weapon systems, as discussed, particularly the 2,000-pound bombs that are being now released potentially for Israel to be used in an urban combat in Gaza, potentially in an operation in Rafah, where the US government says they don't want Israel to conduct it. If these bombs, these are dumb bombs, which are not guided, which have a massive area effect, which means they will most likely leave massive craters in the target area and are absolutely unable to differentiate between civilians and Hamas terrorists. In this kind of context, it's extremely concerning that these arms are being released to Israel when we're just at the brink of a potential operation in Rafah.
Yeah, so in that sense, what does it tell us about what the strategy is, the Israeli military strategy is that they're asking for these particular weapons?
Now, I think the US government is also in a difficult position here because, as you mentioned already in that particular report, is that we see more and more escalation by Israel in Syria against the IRGC, as well as against Hezbollah deep inside Lebanese territory. So there is still that looming idea that potentially there is an escalation on the northern border where Israel will have to escalate, and that will be an existential war for Israel. So the Biden administration is in a difficult position here to say we're not giving any aid anymore because we're completely not in agreement of how Israel performs and how it conducts itself in Gaza. But at the same time, it would leave Israel very vulnerable to a potential escalation with Hezbollah. So it's in that position that, the US administration is saying we can't not withhold US weapons. What needs to happen is that they're making it very clear to the Netanyahu government that this, and also to the IDF, that the use of these weapons is not meant to be in Gaza, but can be used, for example, in other, non-urban combat environments. But they must not be used in an urban combat environment such as Gaza.
And at the moment, any prospect of a ceasefire seems to have gone on the back burner. Tell us about the difficulties that Israel is going to encounter if it does go ahead with an operation in Rafah, and in particular how it fights if the main problem is the fact that people are hiding in tunnels, and how they get intelligence from down there, because presumably that makes it very difficult, doesn't it?
It is a very, very difficult combat environment, but we knew that from the beginning. Israel knew that from the beginning. That most of Gaza has been flattened overground, but obviously underground, the tunnel systems, hundreds of kilometers, are still intact. Hamas fighters are still hiding in there, and we've seen that a military-only approach to this problem, Hamas as an idea, has not been successful. So now bringing this destruction to Rafah, where now more and more people are crammed together, civilians crammed together, means that inevitably we'll see a massive spike of casualties after tens of thousands of civilians have already been killed. So it's going to be extremely severe. It cannot be done from the air. It must not be done by these kind of area effect weapons, such as these bombs. It mustn't happen through artillery. It should be done by IDF soldiers on the ground. But even then, it will be very difficult, and it will mean that there will be massive casualties. So Israel is in a difficult position, but it's a war that Israel cannot win by military means only.
Dr. Andreas Krieg, thank you very much indeed for your analysis. Thank you.